We're live on YouTube. A minute 30 to show. Thirty seconds to live on show. We're live on show.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we start the meeting, I just wanted to touch on a couple points. I wanted to recognize that Goma Public Health announce today that we have had a second death in Algoma region due to COVID-19. On behalf of the community, City Council, myself, and my office, I wanted to express our deepest and sincerest condolences to the family and friends of the person that we lost. So I want to take this opportunity to emphasize the importance in following public health advice. I want to recognize that I think our community has really come together since the Christmas break and really made some necessary adjustments. I think you can see that in the numbers in the community following. But COVID-19 is no less of a danger. We're seeing that the variants are obviously different and challenging, and it appears one of them in particular, if not more than that, spreads even more quickly than the original virus. So it's important that we follow public health advice at all times. And I want to thank the people who have committed to do that. I want to thank all the people who have made sacrifices in their own lives to make sure they've done that. And I'm confident that if we continue to do that, our community will continue on its current path and we'll see our numbers improve even more. Same time, I want to recognize our business community. I know as frankly one of you, somebody who owns and operates his own small business, that this has been challenging. The stopping and starting has been challenging. The being closed to customers is challenging. I just want to recognize your perseverance, the efforts you've made to adapt and to change your model as best you could to survive through these times. I want to thank you for that on behalf of the community, and I want to assure you that if we keep working together, we will get to better days. I'm hoping sooner rather than later. And I want to just encourage the community to shop local and support local. We have to do so in accord with the public health advice that we're receiving, and we have to make sure we're staying safe. But as you can, where you can, when you can, support your local businesses, support your small businesses, and choose to buy from them and to patronize them when you can, to ensure that when we get through this, we get through it in a healthy manner and we can all come through it together. So, Madam Clerk, with those comments, I'd ask that you start the meeting, please.
Under agenda item 1, a motion by Councillors Christian and Gardy, resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting January 11, 2021 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
And under agenda item 3, declaration of pecuniary interest, Councillor Vezo-Allen has declared a conflict with respect to agenda item 6.2, as one of the properties, 148 Daisy Road, was previously owned by her late father's company. And Councillor Shoemaker has declared with respect to bylaws 2021-20, 2021-21, and 2021-22 with respect to 719 Airport Road, as the property owner is a client of the law firm.
Any other conflicts? Seeing none?
Under agenda item 4, a motion by Councillors Christian and Scott, resolved that the agenda for January 25, 2021 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
That will take us to agenda item 5, proclamations and delegations, and agenda item 5.1 is Bell Let's Talk Day.
So I have a proclamation here for Bell Let's Talk Day. I saw Marchie grabbing a sign. Thank you, Marchie. I think Lisa passed out some Bell Let's Talk signs to city councilors, so you can kind of hold them up and say what you're talking about and what we're all focused on, which is raising the stigma. So thank you to the city councilors who are raising those. Whereas Wednesday, January 28, 21 marks the annual Bell Let's Talk Day, a day of conversation and support for mental health. And whereas 1 in 5 Canadians will suffer from mental illness at some point in their lifetime, one of the biggest hurdles for anyone suffering from mental illness is overcoming stigma. It is the #1 reason why 2/3 of those living with a mental illness do not seek help. And whereas Bell Let's Talk Day promotes mental health awareness, acceptance and action built on 4 key pillars: fighting stigma, improving access to care, supporting world-class research, and leading by example in workplace mental health. Whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie encourages you to join the conversation through calls, texts, and social media interaction to drive Bell's donations to mental health. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, proclaim January 28th, 2021 as Bell Let's Talk Day in Sault Ste. Marie. and encourage the community to support this campaign. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you, Madam Clerk. You're on mute, Madam Clerk.
Agenda item 5.2 is Black History Month.
So I have a proclamation for Black History Month. You know, I really look forward to the day when we're back together, because I always enjoy these delegations at council. And every year, this is a great delegation at council, and they always come to tell us about great events they're going to have. And being that I'm about to look at this and read this declaration, yeah, I'm thinking of Acano, and I'm thinking of the events that we would be otherwise holding, and I'm confident we will be back to that by next year, and we will have a much different Black History 21 in 2022 than we are in 2021. So I'll move to the proclamation. In December 1995, the House of Commons officially recognized February as Black History Month, following a motion introduced by the first Black woman elected to Parliament, the Honourable Jean Augustine. And whereas the proud legacy of Black Canadians goes back to the early beginnings of Canadian history, and Black History Month is an opportunity to celebrate the achievements and contributions of Black Canadians, as well as to share their history, their contributions, and their culture. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the month of February 2021 as Black History Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie.
Under agenda item 5.3, the March for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls.
Yeah. And every year we would have a ceremony at the cenotaph in front of the courthouse to commemorate this march, and the march would go from there. And it was always a very impactful event, and you know, I look forward to attending it next year. Whereas the March for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls is a national event held to raise awareness about the disproportionate number of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Whereas this is an opportunity for Indigenous and non-Indigenous people of all genders and ages to gather in solidarity to remember, honor, and grieve those who have passed on or those who have gone missing. Whereas in February 14th, 2021, the people of Bawating and across Canada will participate in the National Day of Action Remembrance for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls to call for action to end this violence. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim February 14th, 2021 as a Memorial Day to remember and honor missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And I encourage all residents of the city to support this very important national event. Thank you.
Agenda item 5.4, the Bonsu Winter Carnival.
So thank you, councillors, for wearing your red in recognition of the Bonsu Winter Carnival. I have a proclamation. Whereas each year the residents of Sault Ste. Marie await the arrival of Mr. Bonsu in the Ontario Winter Carnival with great enthusiasm. Whereas many local individuals, groups, service clubs, and businesses have organized and sponsored a variety of interesting virtual events for 10 days of fun during this year's virtual carnival. In order for all citizens to reflect the spirit of the virtual carnival, we encourage them to wear their Bonsu attire. And whereas this year celebrates the 58th anniversary of this community winter festival. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby request that all citizens support the virtual carnival and wear a Bonsu button during the period of February 5th to February 14th, 2021, which I now proclaim as Ontario Winter Carnival Bonsu season in the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Bonsu is for you. Let it snow. I'd like to really commend the organizers and volunteers of Bonsu for, persevering through this and continuing on with the carnival and making the adjustments they have to be innovative and engage the community. And I'd really encourage the community as best they can to get out and support the folks behind Bonsu and to enjoy Bonsu as best they can this year. Madam Clerk, I think that brings us to 5.5, the PUC.
Yes, it does. And Jim Bonifero, Chair, Robert Brewer, President and CEO, and Kelly McClelland are on the call.
Welcome, Jim. Welcome, Robert. Welcome, Kelly. Jim, are you starting?
I am, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for having us here and giving us the opportunity to speak. We're here today. I'd like to just add some context to it. We're here today to request some modifications to the shareholders agreement. The PUC board, as you all know, act at your direction. We're appointed plan to focus on the key priorities that you, the shareholder, have given us. Some of those are to grow the business, to maintain and build, protect our assets and infrastructure, and to support our community. And proud to say PUC has supported the community in numerous ways through our core business, but also in general social support. Rob Brewer will present the background to support this request, and Kelly McClellan's here to answer any questions should you have that regarding the financial aspect of it. But I'd like to state, while I have the chance, that PUC was able to continue to provide essential services of power and water to the community throughout this pandemic. I want to recognize the management team and all the staff at PUC Services for their focus and adaptability to a changing work environment and for keeping themselves, their co-workers, and the community safe. I would also like to thank the community for respecting the protocols PUC has put in place to physical distance and allowing our crew a safe work site. So with that, I'll pass it over to Rob to provide you some details.
Thanks, Jim, and good evening. And thanks again for the opportunity to be here tonight. So we're bringing forward 3 items for council consideration. The first 2 relate to adjustments to the shareholder agreement that reflect both inflationary and some strategic changes since the shareholder agreement clauses were originally approved. And the third item is an update that we're providing with respect to the Sioux Smart Grid project. There was going to be a slide deck, I thought, that was up. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. So if I could get it to the start, that'd be great. Okay, thank you. All right, you go to the next slide, please. On an annual basis, PUC companies complete significant volumes of upgrades and replacement to the capital infrastructure of the utilities. The shareholder agreements that we have with the city cover off PUC distribution, which is the electric utility, PUC services, which is the shared services company, and PUC Inc., which is the holding company for PUC distribution. The need for infrastructure replacement has increased over the past decade as infrastructure assets have reached their estimated end of useful life. Projections show that that need continues to increase over the next 10 years. And as mentioned last year when we were presenting to council, PUC has put in place financing strategies to ensure that adequate funding is in place for the rising capital requirements. Next slide, please. The shareholder agreement capital thresholds were last adjusted in 2009, and they require shareholder approval for capital expenditures in excess of $5 million for a single expenditure, or $10 million in aggregate for a given year. And as an example, with current 2020 dollars, a substation replacement currently costs between $5 and $6 million alone. And replacing substations is normal course of business for PUC. Next slide, please. Over the next 7 years, we're forecasting capital programs of approximately $78 million for PUC services and PUC distribution, which consistently will have us exceeding the $10 million per year threshold. As PUC distribution invests in its infrastructure, enterprise value is increased and system reliability is improved. So as a result, with increasing CapEx, value to the shareholder improves significantly. Next slide, please. PUC capital investments and the corresponding financing strategies, as have been summarized in the briefing note, will for the foreseeable future be in excess of the thresholds in the current shareholder agreement. So we're recommending to council that those thresholds be increased to single capital expenditures of $10 million and aggregate capital expenditures of $20 million to ensure that normal course of business activities don't require shareholder approval. One-time large projects like Sioux Smart Grid will continue to be brought forward to council for approval. Next slide, please. So we're recommending that Clause G of Schedule A be amended as indicated to reflect those current capital thresholds. I believe that's in the bylaw that comes later in the agenda as well. Next slide, please. The second item that we have is that we're recommending amendments in the shareholder agreement in relation to the donation spending limit. This limit was set in 2013 and it has not been adjusted since. And as you may be aware, PUC contributes annually to a number of charities and events in Sault Ste. Marie, including the Light Up the Downtown initiative and a number of charities focused on those less fortunate within our community. In 2013, a cap on donations was set at no more than 10,000 for any one donation and no more than 50,000 in aggregate for the PUC companies. Next slide, please. In 2019, PUC created a donation committee, as described in the briefing note, that independently reviews and recommends approval of donations. Donations exceeding $2,000 require approval by that committee and a second approval by myself. In March of 2020, PUC revised its donation policy to focus on 4 key pillars. And these pillars that you see on your screen have direct links to our corporate values at PUC. At PUC, we believe that we have a social responsibility to give back to the community that supports us. Next slide, please. So we're requesting that the annual donation limit be adjusted from the $50,000 aggregate that was set in 2013 to an aggregate threshold of $100,000. We aren't requesting that the individual donation limit be changed, as we have moved to smaller, more targeted donations. We've all seen additional need for financial support in the community, and this increase would enable PUC to provide additional support at a time when the people of Sault Ste. Marie need it the most, and at a time when our charitable organizations are under tremendous strain. Before I move on to the smart grid update, Mr. Mayor, are there any questions that I might answer with respect to the recommended amendments to the shareholder agreement?
Well, I do have Councillor Christian who has indicated that he has a question, so I'll go to him.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You can hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead,
Okay,
Paul.
thank you. Rob, Jim, Kelly, thank you very much for the presentation and presenting to us tonight. Before I ask my question, I just want to state publicly again, I appreciate the leadership at the PUC. Having spent some time on the board, I know that the PUC, the city's interest in the PUC are in good hands. The city is well served by the management group there, so I appreciate that. Staff there, especially the leadership group, are very forward thinking. So thank you very much for the work you do. My question, Rob.
Oh, we seem to have, yeah, you're echoing.
Wow. So you get to hear me more than once. How lucky.
Well, I think maybe Councillor Hollingsworth is on 2 modes here. I think she might be on her phone and also on her computer. So that might be what's happening here. So
okay, try.
If one can go ahead, Councillor.
Okay. Rob, my question to you is, I understand why you're looking for a change in the shareholder agreement. Could you touch on some of the specifics over the next few years that you'll be investing in to give us some context to what you're asking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're replacing conductor that's of a certain vintage where it warrants safety replacement for safety reasons. About every 3rd year, we replace a substation. And that's simply because, again, they're at end of life. They're in that sort of 40, 50, 60 year lifespan. And so at about 50-year mark is generally where we target replacement. And a lot of our infrastructure was put in place in the baby boom era. And so we're starting to see very significant amounts of it coming of age at the same time. And so that's why the capital programs have been ramped up. And we've put in place again some of the financing strategies to make sure that that we're in a position to do what we need to do.
And I think at the presentation you said that there's going to be minimal, no impact on ratepayers for this type of capital expenditure. Is that correct?
No, the capital expenditures about every fifth year when we go into a cost of service get put into rate base.
Right.
And PUC gets a return based on the capital that it has invested in the electric utility. I think the clause that you're mentioning is one that's in the donation limits briefing.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I misspoke. All right, that's it for me on that. I have a question on the smart grid, but I'll wait on that.
Okay, so we have Councillor Dufour. Is your question on the material covered so far?
Yeah, it's on the charitable donation limit.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Brewer. I was just curious on the charitable donations. Does the PUC on their website have some contact information posted for this committee in case there are charities out there who feel that their mandate aligns with the corporate values that you shared?
You know, it's a good question. I'm not sure if it is on our website or not. It is publicly known, but if it isn't on our website, it's a great idea and it should be.
Yeah, and I was just wondering too, does the PUC perhaps in their annual report share a list of the charities that have been recipients of donations?
We do regularly list some of the key donations we made, but we do make everything from $50 donations up to donations in the few thousands of dollars. So there's quite a few, and we've tried to become more targeted, and that's expanded the reach. So we could provide a report at the end of the year of where we've given donations to, though, but we haven't done that today.
I think it's great. I support increasing the donation limit, and yeah, if you guys could make sure that it's posted there for charities to be able to apply, I think that would be a great thing for the community. Thanks very much, gentlemen.
Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess a question to Rob regarding the 50,000 to 100,000. Have you maxed out the 50,000 every year for the last 4 or 5 years?
So we've been close, and this year we were right up to pretty much the limit, and we've obviously tried to make sure we stay within the limit as it's part of the shareholder agreement. But what we saw this year was in 2020 was some significant need that we didn't necessarily have the resources to help with, and so because of that limit, so it's one of the reasons we've come back and said that you know, we think an addition is really worthwhile in terms of what we're trying to help out with.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Council, can we move on? Rob can continue his presentation. I'm sorry, we have Councillor Shoemaker. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I thought you had seen my hand there.
No, I apologize. I didn't. Your suit's the same color as your flag, and you're obscured there a little bit.
Yes, I should have been wearing red. I apologize for that.
There's no contrast in your image there.
Through you to Mr. Brewer. On the donation policy, Mr. Brewer, are there restrictions that public companies typically follow, like no political donations, nothing to anything kind of, you know, that would offend the public?
Absolutely, there are. Yeah. So political donations, religious organizations. We're looking for organizations with charitable or nonprofit status. It's not meant to be subsidizing sport teams. It's more meant to be supporting broad-based groups that have direct impact on the community.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And the other thing, your report says that individual donations are capped, or sorry, the max for any donation is 10,000. I remember this 10 years ago, maybe there was some criticism over a donation to Algoma University that was fairly substantial. I think it was a lot more than 10,000. Is that a cap that came in after that event?
So the two numbers, the 10 and the 50, came in after that event. And since then, we've ensured that there's a very robust policy around the way that donations are made. And we've really tried to move to more smaller targeted donations to community groups rather than to large donations to something like that.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I I think that represents all the questions on this part of your presentation, Rob, if you can continue with the remainder.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So
Throw
we'll
the
get your presentation back up on the screen here. Yeah, very good.
Okay, we go to the next slide. And then the one after that, please. Okay. So Mr. Bonifero and I briefed council in July of 2018 about a transformational project for PUC, the Sioux Smart Grid. And as you may recall, it has two main components, voltage optimization and distribution automation. Voltage optimization achieves some significant energy savings, and distribution automation increases the reliability of our system. Sioux Smart Grid also allows us to incorporate more future DERs, or distributed energy resources, which are things like electric vehicles, at-home generation, battery storage, while also reducing greenhouse gas emissions in a very meaningful way. Sioux Smart Grid was submitted to the OEB for approval and was then amended based on feedback received. Next slide, please. The amended application has some differences from the original application. Firstly, it was originally proposed to finance the project through a public-private partnership, or a P3 model. We've moved to a traditional financing model based on feedback that we received from the OEB through that original process, and the fact that PUC is in a much stronger financial position. The change in financing results in some direct savings, greater direct involvement and control of the project, and allows us to get guarantees on the energy savings from the EPC contractor, Black & Veatch. Direct involvement allows us to retain more expertise and technology within the PUC ranks as well. Next slide, please. So the amended application was submitted in Q4 of 2020, and it is currently in the final portions of the interrogatory phase. We expect to have a go or no go on the project later this year, probably mid to end of Q2. And we will return to council when it's approved with a revised project schedule, revised financing, and a final budget, and the projected ratepayer savings. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions, Mr. Mayor, that you might have on Sioux Smart Grid.
Okay, so Council, do we have any questions on this project? Councilor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Rob. Rob, perhaps you could explain a little bit about voltage optimization. It sounds good, but what specifically will the average consumer, how will the average consumer benefit from that? Or will they?
They will. So most appliances in your house consume energy at a voltage range. And so the energy that you use is directly proportional to the voltage that comes through the wires. What we're able to do with voltage optimization is optimize the voltage that our customers receive into the lower band that's acceptable for those appliances, which results in lower consumption of energy. It also results in lower generation requirements for energy, which results in lower greenhouse gas emissions, because some of the generation that is used in this province emits greenhouse gases. So by controlling that voltage, we're able to optimize it to the lower end of the band, and customers see a net benefit through energy savings, and we all see a net benefit to a cleaner environment.
Thank you. Good. Thank you very much. Very helpful. And you also talked about system reliability. How does a smart grid do that in layman's terms?
So the distribution automation portion of the smart grid project basically puts intelligence into the system and allows it to self-heal. So as there's a fault in the system, the sensors identify the area that fault is in. They'll isolate that area, and they'll reestablish power into the areas that they can isolate outside of that. So instead of having hundreds or thousands of customers off because of a single fault, we can have a handful. And so it's a very significant benefit to customers, and it's part of our goal in providing a better service.
Excellent. And one final question. Smart grid technology, how many cities in Ontario are utilizing this type of technology right now?
This will be the first community-wide smart grid in Ontario.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for your answers.
Anything else, council? Before we move on, I want to just reiterate a couple comments on my own thank you and expression of appreciation to Jim and the board. Jim's been a tremendous leader at the PUC for a number of years now. I've been there for 6 and he's been there the whole time, so it's at least 6 during my time. And I want to thank him for his leadership, and I want to thank all of the directors at that board. As Paul had indicated, Councillor Christian indicated, our community is in very good hands with that group of leaders and the effort they make at that board. I want to thank the management team there and all the staff for the work they're doing. I support the changes that are in front of us today for. I think they're reasonable changes, and I trust their discretion and their judgment to serve our community properly. I just want to make some comments on the smart grid. This has been a long time coming. It's certainly something that we've been working on for quite a while. I think it's something also that's been on the books in one form or another, at least discussed since I started 6 years ago. I think it's an incredibly important project for our community. I would love to see it come to fruition in the very near term, so we could lead on it. I have no doubt that many other communities would follow us, and I have no doubt that when it's done and implemented, it's something down the road that we will see paid a number of dividends and was a smart thing to do. So I thank the team for really sticking on that, because it's not been easy. The process you have to go through to get it approved has been, as obviously, an onerous process, and they've stuck with it. We're getting farther down the road, and it's something that I'm excited about and happy to see that we're continuing to drive forward on. So thank you for that. Madam Clerk, I'm not sure if we're just going to leave this to bylaws or if we're going to bring anything forward now.
The 2 bylaws that will be passed as a result of this are on the bylaw consent agenda, so they could just be passed on consent there.
Okay, Council, before we let the leadership of the PUC go here, anything else for them? Seeing nothing, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your continued support.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, we can move on to, I think Mr. Doe's also joined us here, so we can move on to the next item.
Yes,
5.6.
agenda item 5.6, Mental Health and Addiction Alliance and Mobility Bus. And with respect to this item, we have Luke Dufort, Chair, and Mike Nadeau, CAO of the District Sault Ste. Marie Social Services Administration Board, as well Eric Landrio, Algoma Ontario Health Team, Lisa Case, the Sioux Area Hospital, Annette Kataimaki, Canadian Mental Health Association, and Michelle Brisbois with the Superior Family Health Team.
Okay, so Luke, Mike, Eric, Lisa, Annette, Michelle, welcome everybody. Luke, yours was the first name mentioned, so I assume we're starting with you. Is that correct, Councillor Dufort?
I'm saving my comments for after the presentation. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I believe Mike's going to tee this one up.
Okay, Mr. Nadeau, we're starting with you then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, City Council members, for allowing us to present tonight. I just want to provide an overview. Eric's going to actually go through the presentation, but just for some context, last September, the Mayor and Board Chair Dufour asked me to attend a meeting. I went to the meeting, and we were talking about the mental health and addiction crisis that's happening locally within the community. I was advising them that this is a provincial and a national trend that's not isolated within Sault Ste. Marie. However, we did need to be strategic in how we could address it. So the Mayor and Chair Dufour specifically asked me, they said, we know that we need increased withdrawal and treatment facilities. We know that we need increased social housing and supportive housing. However, those require significant provincial investments. What can we do at the community level? What can we do at the local level to impact and make a positive impact on people's lives? So with that, I reached out. I left the meeting and I reached out to some select partners. And in October, we began meeting on a weekly basis. There was Annette from CMHA, Lisa Case from Surrey Hospital, Michelle from Superior Health Team, Dr. McLean from Superior Health Team, Dr. Maloney from the RAM Clinic, Ali Juma from Algoma Family Services, Dominic Noel from the Nurse Practitioners Clinic, Chief Stevenson from Sault Ste. Marie Police, Eric from the Ontario Health Team, and Jen Oseski from the Northeast LHIN. And Eric's going to walk us through the presentation about the supports and the outreach strategy that we've come up with. And after he's concluded, I am going to spend about 1 minute just talking about some additional DSAB investments that are going to be coming online in 2021. So with that, I'll pass it over to Eric.
Eric, welcome to council.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I have a presentation that I think Madison is probably going to bring up.
There we go.
Okay, next slide. So yes, I'm Eric Landreau. I'm the Director of Integrated Care with the Algoma Ontario Health Team. So we're a partnership across the health, social, and health promotion services, and really working together towards a more integrated health system for the residents of Algoma. So integrated care is a technical way of saying that we're really working towards providing coordinated wraparound services to patients, families, and the community. And so what it means is we're looking at individuals, not for their specific disease, but we're considering them in the broader context of their health and social well-being. So we start looking at care that we provide outside of our walls while planning more effectively with partners. Next slide. And so this is really why I'm really excited to co-present with our partners on the Community Wellness Bus. So it represents a new way for many of us to come together around the needs of the community. So what we did is we identified an unmet need for mental health and addiction services in the downtown core. Like Mike said, we started meeting in the fall, we gathered data, we did an environmental scan, we looked at existing services and gaps, and we came up with a community wellness bus. And it's meant to provide an outreach service, so including primary mental health and preventative care, directly to underserved members of our community in the downtown core. So it will provide essential health services, but also send referrals where deemed appropriate, provide necessities, and build community relationships while improving community safety by being a welcoming presence. Next slide. So our starting point was really speaking with individuals like Brandy, who sent us a picture of her only pair of shoes afterwards, and many of our partners, whether it's clinicians or police, that highlighted gaps in the level of care and expressed a desire to intervene earlier and in a different way to get people the care they needed, but also to get them back on their feet. What we know is 22.9% more social assistance is provided in the downtown area. We also know that hospitalizations from mental health and addictions is 3 times more than the rest of Ontario. Self-harm is 2.25 times higher, and to die by suicide is 1.6 times higher relative to the rest of the province. Hospitalization from drug toxicity is 2 times higher, and opioid toxicity 3 times higher. Next slide. So the Community Wellness Bus is an evidence-based model of outreach services. So it's grounded in a model of primary health care. So it looks at your physical, mental, and social well-being. And we know that due to the large homeless and underhoused population who suffer disproportionately from mental health and addictions issues, this is going to be a very major area of focus for the bus. So the bus is being designed to deliver culturally sensitive care, to be a gateway for patients to health and social services, and potentially reduce emergency department and EMS utilization. It's also going to improve community safety by being an added presence and do community engagement. Typically, buses such as these develop a schedule, so a heavy focus on after hours or evening, and offer a consistent presence outside of areas such as shelters or wherever the target population can be found. So in anticipation of our launch, we're going to be working to identify and schedule where the bus will be and leverage existing services, in particular, the mental health and social service program cluster in the downtown core. Next slide, please. So I've already covered these in a way, but just to kind of sum up, the objectives for the wellness bus is to meet people living in vulnerable situations where they're at, to provide culturally safe on-ramp for access and care, to improve community safety, and to rebuild trust with the community. Next slide. And as Mike outlined, this is just a small piece of the puzzle. So we highlighted in the blue, what the focus of the community wellness bus will be. And this is just to say it's a lower intensity service based outside of the walls of any one organization. And what we're doing is aiming to intervene sooner to prevent progression to higher acute services. Next slide, please. And to highlight how the experience is going to change. So when we think about our existing state, it's a little bit more of a reactive model based on a medicalized model of care. So especially in after hours, often our only option is for people to go to the emergency department, where we hear constant stories of people cycling in and out. And in the future state with the wellness bus, we see it as an opportunity to intervene sooner, to deliver some care on site, and then to build a relationship, whether that's with housing or social services, primary care, to really have the optimal utilization of services. Next slide. So with partners, we've worked in the very little time that we got together since the fall, really to align funding and positions to really get started. So we've identified a registered health professional, such as a nurse, a mental health and addictions worker, and a peer worker, who will then be supported and supervised by a larger team. The team is going to do on-site medical assessments and counseling, and also the appropriate referrals. And there's going to be a very large element of social service referrals. So whether that's to initiatives such as housing or anti-human trafficking. Next slide, please. And in terms of timelines, I think it's important to say that we're not yet operational. We're planning for a launch later this spring. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, whether that's hiring staff or finalizing a program design. So there'll be lots of opportunities to really flesh out the program and our partnerships. We're aiming to launch it as soon as we can and really continue to evolve the service based on feedback and utilization. Next slide. So just to recap, the Community Wellness Bus is aiming to improve the continuity of care for an underserved population with mental health and addictions issues that can be better managed in a community-based setting. We're aiming to improve health outcomes and equity while increasing collaboration across community partners to allow better utilization of services. And I think most importantly, we're going to be providing care with respect and dignity, and we're going to be aiming to rebuild trust with the community and the healthcare system. Next slide. So that just brings me to the end of the presentation. A very big thank you to the 8 partners, as Mike said. Everyone is incredibly passionate about this project, and we're just excited to see it off the ground. Thank you.
And if you could just go ahead one more slide, please.
Thank you for that, Eric.
One more slide. Thank you very much. So that was the group initiative, Mr. Mayor, that you and Board Chair Dufour had asked me to come back with, which we're really excited about, and we can answer questions about. Additionally, the DSAB has also purchased the former Sacred Heart School and coming online in 2021 to make a positive impact in the mental health and addictions scope of services. We will be adding the Neighborhood Resource Center to that facility. On Gore Street, we had around 1,500 square feet of office space that the Neighborhood Resource Center used to work out of. Under the new model, we will be able to increase that space to over 3,000. So we're going to be able to double the footprint of the Neighborhood Resource Center. We're also going to be adding up to 20 transitional housing beds into that facility. Housing beds are in transition beds are in short supply with the recent fire of some of the former facilities, buildings that used to provide transitional housing. We are also going to be moving our men's shelter into that location. Currently, the men's shelter is managed and operated by Vincent Place. We've been having discussions with Vincent Place for about the last 6 months to a year, and Vincent Place is going to get back into the transition housing business. They're going to still stay in their core business on food security, their thrift store, the meals, et cetera, but they're going to stop over time providing the emergency shelter, and the emergency shelter will be transitioned into this location. And I'm really excited to announce that Canadian Mental Health Association will be the service provider through for the new men's shelter, which we do believe will bring a whole bunch of mental health and addiction services into the fold of the people that are staying in the emergency shelter for the duration. So I just wanted to also highlight those two initiatives that are also coming online in response to the mandate that you and Chair Dufour asked me to come back with.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nadeau. Is anybody else from your group presenting, or are we moving to Councillor Dufour now?
We are done our presentation, and now it's open for questions, should there be any. Or
Okay,
Councillor Dufour.
Yeah, Councillor Dufour, do you want to speak before we take questions, or do you want to speak after we take questions?
I'll go ahead after we take questions, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no problem. Council, do we have any questions for our presenters on this topic? Councillor, I will start with Councillor Wetzel, and Councillor Shoemaker.
I don't have a question, Mr. Mayor. I just have a comment.
Sorry, questions or comments. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Firstly, I just really want to commend all the 8 agencies. I've been doing this work for a very long time, and even 10 years ago, I don't think you would have seen people come together and collaborate with something like this. So I think it's really speaks to the leadership and the professionalism and the fact that all of you just really care and you want to make a difference. And I miss the monthly meetings at the Neighborhood Resource Center, so I'm looking forward to when we can do that again in person. I also want to say that there definitely is a need. I see it every day. There are still people congregating on Gore Street by the Neighborhood Resource Center, and we have seen some movement with Soya being in the area and helping hands, but I see it every day at G4G, and I think it's going to be a real positive, and I look forward to seeing the bus come to fruition. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I just missed it in the presentation. How will someone go about coordinating a healthcare visit to the bus?
So I'll just answer that, and then maybe Lisa or anybody else could step in. So from my experience with other healthcare buses, so basically the bus will show up at you develop a program as to when it will be at certain locations. So people come to know that it's going to be there or to expect it. And, you know, having the peer support worker and others involved really helps to build trust and draw people out, I think. So what we're really aiming to be is a fixture in the community on a regular basis, so people will know what they're able to access at that location.
Thanks. That raises a different question, which is there, do people queue up or do they make appointments? I would be concerned if they were queuing up about privacy issues.
Yeah, I think we're in a different time now with COVID-19, and something that we're thinking through right now, especially. Generally speaking, people actually would normally come into the bus, or the person does outreach within a private room or whatnot, for example, the shelter or any of the other locations. So we're all, especially within healthcare, bound by kind of privacy legislation and delivering care in a way that respects people's dignity. So I think that will be through and through.
Okay, and last question. Thanks for that. That helps. Sounds like it's being worked on, but not kind of set in stone yet. Last question is with respect to the safety of those delivering services from the bus. Is there? I presume there's no prescription drugs or anything on site that would cause concern for their safety.
I'll let Lisa answer that one. From Sioux Area Hospital.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. We would anticipate that we might have some medications for supporting withdrawal symptoms, things like that. So when we think about anti-nausea, anti-vomiting, anti-diarrhea medications, things like that, that you could get at any, often you could get at any gas station or drugstore. We think of, brand labels like Pepto-Bismol, Gravol, antacids, things like that. Those would be under medical directives for the nurse if that's the staffing model that we end up going towards. And then just to respond to the question around queuing up and how will people make appointments, I think Michelle Brisebois from Superior Family Health Team might be best suited to respond to when we think of people that don't typically do well with scheduled appointments through primary care. If Michelle's available to talk to that just for a moment, she sums it up very, very well.
Hi, thank you. I can definitely talk about that. We have a lot of patients, excuse me, just from working at the Neighborhood Resource Center. They don't do well with appointments. They need to be able to just walk up and seek care when and where they need it. Those folks don't do well attached to providers. This is kind of the model of care that seems to work for them. So, we're going to have to, as we move forward, I think we'll just let the patients and the clients that we're seeing decide how that care is going to be given to them. It's going to be slow to start. I'm sure we're going to have to gain trust, but we'll make it work. So as for them queuing up, yeah, we'll make it work.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Sounds like a fantastic project and much needed resource. So thanks to everybody for the additional information.
Okay, so I have Councillor Hollingsworth and then Councillor Bruni.
Thank you. Can you hear me,
Yep.
Mayor?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay. Thank you to everyone with regards to this presentation. I know it was much of a team effort, so I know everyone is quite excited about this. Just a few questions. If I have repeating, just let me know, your Mayor. The first question I have is resources. You touched on registered nurses as one example and so forth. Are these going to be possibly nurses jointly used from the Superior Hospital, or are the resources going to be just a fresh new team built? I'm not sure who to direct that to. Is it Lisa? Kate?
Hi, it's Lisa. Yeah. So we are anticipating being able to build a new team, but from a Superior Hospital perspective, particularly when we think of community or home-based withdrawal management, we want those staff to be cross-trained, to be able to work and understand all parts of that continuum of care. So we're anticipating a dedicated team, but also to have knowledge, skill, ability to work across the system and understand the different parts of the system. I think we would see the same thing with the peer worker that Annette Katajimaki might be best suited to speak to.
Okay.
Thanks, Lisa.
Is Annette going to speak? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm right here. Yeah, so we have been quite productive in producing a lot of great peer workers. So when we talk about a peer worker, we're talking about people with lived experience. So these folks have lived a mental health and are continuing to live a mental health journey and or addictions journey. And so we have, through a grant with Health Canada, have been able to provide so far 10 workers with very advanced training around how to be a good peer provider, how to understand mental health and addictions using their own platform of being a person with a lived experience. These folks are ready to go. They're very anxious to be put into agencies, organizations, and programs where they can use their particular skill set and talk to folks from that lived experience model. So this grant is for about 4 years, and every year we hope to train 10 more peer workers and get them into programs, services in our communities. So it'll be different peer workers. None of them really want full-time work, but they all want to be able to share their personal experiences and help others. It's their way of giving back.
Thank you. That is excellent. Annette, to hear that, having the peer. Another question with regards to resources, community paramedicine is becoming very well known through other communities. Do you anticipate, besides RNs, besides these peer reviews and so forth, do you anticipate using our paramedics somehow into this program?
It's Mike through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. I do not anticipate using community paramedicine through this program at this time. Currently, there is not an active community paramedic program within the district. I can advise you, though, that there are 2 proposals that we have submitted, and we're currently working on trying to secure funding from the LIN or from the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care to try to bring that online in line in the community. So right now, we do not have the capacity to do it. However, Chief Rushworth and I have been aggressively working with community partners and the LIN to try to bring that service into the Sioux for about the last 14 months.
Okay, thank you. And your Mayor, I just have 2 more questions for this wonderful project, if you may. And my other question is, so from my understanding, the individual that may be having a challenge can visit the wellness bus and you help and assess them. If they don't have a fixed address and they want more help, how can we continue on building that relationship with them? Is this a policy, a process that still needs to be developed? Because I know that there's different steps involved to help a person. But are you concerned that you may not be able to keep the relationship and so forth because not fixed address, or they might be couch surfing and so forth? And would that be towards Lisa Case?
Perhaps Lisa can explain best from the hospital perspective. I'll just kind of add in that currently these individuals are receiving very episodic care with different providers at different times. And I think having a presence where they will be known to individuals will be very important for some level of continuity of care. And I don't think this would be any different from individuals that are undocumented. So we would probably be using, in terms of charting and things like that, a similar process, which I don't know what that is exactly within Sioux Area Hospital, but that's Lisa Case might be able to answer that.
So just in the context, so we think early on as we're establishing relationships, when one of the pieces that Eric referenced a number of times is about building trust and repairing trust with the healthcare community for a number of individuals in our community. So we think about, initially, it's about getting them the resources they need on that particular day. And sometimes that's not necessarily healthcare, but that might be socks, snack. When you think of things like bus passes or a bit bigger ticket items like boots or coats, things like that. And one of the things we've talked about is how we will get the clothing or the articles of clothing to them rather than have them have to make an appointment to file an application to then get a pair of boots, things like that. So within that system, having clear communication amongst community partners. And I think as a leadership group, we're doing that well now. And we'll instill that in the different staff that are working in the bus. And then within the hospital system, so someone who maybe needs follow-up care, or if we're able to link them from the bus to, say, the addiction medicine providers, or to housing, or to the shelter that we heard will be coming, shifting over to Canadian Mental Health, that communication trail and having the person who's accessing the care own their plan, own their transition plan as they maybe move throughout the system. There'll be days when they're doing really well, and periods of time when they're doing quite well, and other times when they're struggling more. And how can that same plan stay with them as we go? Fortunately, I think we have some good experience with Canadian Mental Health, specifically on transition plans, and we know kind of what we've tried before that hasn't worked well, what we would do differently as we move forward with this. As far as a medical record, we still need to work out those pieces of it. Certainly, we would want the emerge physician to be able to access any documentation that was relevant that happened on the wellness bus for the nurse. From a continuum of care, what recommendations, whether or not they've had any recent overdoses or difficulties with medication or other health conditions. Hopefully that makes sense for folks.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. And one final question, directed to maybe Eric or Lisa. Again, this is a wonderful, wonderful initiative. So congratulations to everyone involved. And may we ask for, if it's okay with your worship, for an update once this is actually rolled out and up and running, maybe 6 months to a year after, so we can just see your wonderful results. So an update would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for everything.
Thank you. So Councilor Bruni, we have you next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know who to direct the question to, but will this be a 24/7 operation, or will it be just selected hours of the day, or is it strictly on weekends?
It's Eric. I think we'll be starting initially. So we're developing the program based on availability of staff as well that we're recruiting. But our goal is really to be outside of core working hours where the need is greatest. So in the evenings and after hours. It's not going to be 7 days a week to start. We don't have the funding and the staff for that. However, we're going to be looking at utilization, and I think that will help us build the case for what the right hours will be based on when people are accessing it as well.
Okay, I guess my only concern is the safety of the staff, especially if it's during the evening, late hours. But I think the program is an excellent program. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Dufour, did you want to make your comments now, following which I'll express some appreciation, and then we can get to the planning agenda?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to CEO Mike Nadeau and the representatives from all of our community partners here today. I really can't be said enough that none of these interventions would be possible without you, and I and the community sincerely appreciate all of your efforts. As was explained, the basis for this motion came from a realization with the onset of the pandemic and last summer that after our detox center was reduced and the NRC was closed, that we were really going backwards in the fight against the opioid crisis. We were beginning to see the cost of a lack of properly funded services being borne by downtown business owners and residents who were dealing with unprecedented levels of visible homelessness and mental illness. Our frontline workers at social services and its partner agencies were reporting the same thing. We really needed to intervene to keep our downtown a safe place to live and to work. At our meeting last summer, Mr. Mayor, we agreed to ask CEO Nadeau to see if he could meet with some of our community partners to determine how, in the absence of provincial investment in residential mental health and addictions treatment, we could use our current funding envelopes to strategically invest and better bring services to this population. Tonight's presentation is just the beginning of those efforts. This news is positive, but it's not meant to be enough to properly address the crisis. We need further provincial investment in mental health and addictions. As shown in one of Eric's slides, this is an enhancement to our second and third levels of care. We still require more intense forms of treatment. To date, the province has been a good partner to the DSAB. As board chair, I've had a productive working relationship with Minister Romano, whose government has allocated our DSAB with significant funds from the federal Safe Restart Agreement. These funds have played a critical role in our response to the homelessness crisis, and we appreciate his government's cooperation on this file. My hope is that this work can continue to progress into larger investments in some kind of residential mental health and addictions treatment in Sault Ste. Marie. We fall below what our northern neighbors have access to for these services, and it's not right. Tonight, City Council has an opportunity to continue to support these efforts, not just in lobbying the province, but also in supporting direct local action that can begin to meet the crisis unfolding in our neighborhoods. Mr. Mayor, I hope that I can count on the unanimous support of yourself and all of my fellow councillors. Thank you very much.
I expect you can, Mr. Dufour, sorry, Councilor Dufour. And before we call up that motion, and we'll read that motion now and deal with it, I do want to make a few comments. First off, thanks to you and Mike for meeting with me when you did last year. Thanks to Mike for kind of taking the spirit of that meeting and working with our community partners to try and bring something to council and to the community at large. Thanks to all the community partners on the line for your good work. One of the things that is most heartening about being the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie is all the collaboration you see and the goodwill you see across community partners to work together. That's demonstrated in this project. So I express my deepest appreciation, but I don't want to lose one really important point in this. We at the municipal level, and I include the social services in that, I include the frontline services, I include Sault Area Hospital and all of the parties, Canadian Mental Health, all the parties that work together on a daily basis to serve the community. We need help. We don't have the resources or the infrastructure to address or deal with the opioid crisis that we've been dealing with for a number of years now. And as Councillor Dufour noted, to some degree, we've gone backwards, and we don't have some very basic infrastructure in our community that we need. So what you're seeing today is an effort that is born out of the community trying to do its best to address the challenges that it faces, but we need more help from our provincial government and our provincial funding agencies, particularly the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. And we need whatever help the federal government can contribute financially, because this is certainly a national problem. But staying focused on ourselves and our province and our community, we need to do more to help people. We see it across our community. We know that people need help. We know that the problem is becoming, the challenges are becoming more acute. So I don't want anybody out there who is in need of help to think that we are sitting here kind of thinking the job is done. We recognize that it isn't. As Councillor Dufour so ably noted, this is just one aspect of what we're trying to do, but more needs to be done. And I want to make it very clear that we'll continue to call on our provincial and federal partners to help us do what we can do, as much as we can do, to help the people in our community that need that help. Because this is a challenge that has significantly exceeds the capacity of the community to meet it. And that capacity can only be bolstered by the levels of government that have the jurisdiction to bolster it and have the financial resources to bolster it. And that isn't the municipality. So I want to thank everybody for their efforts, but I want to assure the community that we recognize that we need to do more. We all need to do more, and we'll continue to try to do more. So, Madam Clerk, if I could have you read the motion, please, that Councillor Dufour and Councillor Vezel-Allen have before us.
The motion by Councillors Dufour and Vezel-Allen, whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie and its partner, the District of Sault Ste. Marie Social Services Administration Board, have a specific and limited legal mandate to deliver local services to the residents of Sault Ste. Marie. And whereas the Province of Ontario possesses the exclusive constitutional mandate to deliver healthcare services to the residents of Sault Ste. Marie through the Sault Area Hospital and other provincially funded agencies. And whereas those provincially mandated services in Sault Ste. Marie have been reduced with the closure of our detox facility without any announcement of other residential treatment options or facility. And whereas the municipally managed Neighborhood Resource Center was closed due to the pandemic and issues with the facility. And whereas citizens of Sault Ste. Marie have died and continue to die due to the mental health and addiction crisis, which is becoming significantly more severe. And whereas the City of Sault Ste. Marie and its community partners have called on the provincial government for years to properly fund mental health, addiction, withdrawal, and recovery services in our community. Now therefore be it resolved that as a new expanded Neighborhood Resource Center is being brought back to the community, as the District of Sault Ste. Marie Social Services Administration Board is making a significant investment in the quality of our shelter system, that the Province of Ontario be called upon to immediately fully fund a residential treatment facility to adequately respond to and address the mental health and addiction crisis in Sault Ste. Marie.
So, Councillor Dufour indicated that he hoped that this was unanimously approved. I certainly hope it is too. All in favor? Unanimously carried. Again, to our community partners, Mr. Nadeau, thank you very much for the work you presented to us today. It is very deeply and sincerely appreciated. And whatever we can do to continue to support all of your efforts will certainly be there to support them. So thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So,
That will take
Madam
us to
Clerk,
planning.
yeah, we have to go to planning. So that brings us to our planning agenda. So 7.7.1.
Application 57T 21501, 331, 333, 341, and 349 Patrick Street. Motion by Councillors Christian and Gardy, resolved that the report of the Senior Planner dated January 25, 2021, concerning application 57T 21501 be received, and that Council grant draft plan approval for a 14-unit or lot vacant land condominium consisting of not more than 49 multiple attached dwelling units, subject to the following conditions of draft approval. 1, prior to registration, the subdivider enter into a subdivision agreement with respect to, but not limited to, the following: that the private roadway access points to public streets, corner roundings, in-ground services, stormwater management works, and other matters be designed and constructed to the satisfaction of the Director of Engineering or his designate; that telecommunication, natural gas, and any other private infrastructure be constructed to the satisfaction of the agency having jurisdiction over that infrastructure. A, that the private roadway access points to public streets, I think that's duplicated. Prior to the finalization of the subdivision agreement, the developer be required to enter into servicing agreements with PUC Services Inc. and PUC Distribution Inc. with respect to water services, electrical services, and street lighting. 3, prior to the finalization of the subdivision agreement, the applicant address the items and submit the required information prescribed by engineering services in a letter dated January 6, 2021, and attached to this report, and that no work commence without the approval of the Director of Engineering and the Director of Planning or their designates. Any work which requires approvals from the city or other agencies shall not commence until such approvals and agreements are endorsed. Number 4, as part of the finalization of the subdivision agreement, the developer be required to pay cash in lieu of parkland. Number 5, as part of the finalization of the subdivision agreement, a per lot fee, the amount to be determined by engineering services, shall be collected from the developer for tree plantings. Number 6, prior to the finalization of the subdivision agreement, the developer provide an access easement in favor of 124 Wallace Terrace to grant the owner of 124 Wallace Terrace rear yard access. Prior to registration, any part of the condominium, the developer provides a letter of credit to the city, which equals the cost of constructing any common elements associated with the registration. The amount shall be to the satisfaction of the Director of Engineering and the Director of Planning or their designates, and that the legal department be requested to prepare the necessary bylaws to effect the same. Carlos Spadafora, counsel for the applicant, is on the call.
Okay, so welcome to council, Mr. Spadafora. Do we have a Mr. McConnell on the call?
Yes, we do, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure what happened to video, but hopefully you can hear me all right.
We can hear you just fine. And so before we get to Mr. Spadafora, on behalf of the applicant, do you want to give council and the people watching at home just a summary of the application?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the former William Merrifield School site on Patrick Street. The request before council tonight is for the approval of a draft plan of condominium, which would allow the property to be developed in phases. The completed project will have 49 rental townhouse units. The zoning on this property is already in place, has been in place for a number of years, and this application, being the draft plan of condominium approval, is recommended for approval by staff. As the clerk mentioned, Mr. Spadafora is on the line, and both Mr. Spadafora and myself are available to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Mr. Spadafora, did you want to make any representations with respect to the application?
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, and good afternoon to everyone. So I will not get into repeating what Mr. McConnell already mentioned, but this is the former school, and in that sense, what we are seeing is that this is growing opportunities to do some infill type of development, where we're basically looking at trying to meet requirements for residential intensification and mixed residential uses. So where you have perhaps a neighborhood such as this area here, where you've had traditionally a lot of single family homes, and over time
we see these opportunities that present themselves, and we are seeing here again another case of a growing number of these types of developments, certain number of units that are geared towards the idea of trying to intensify some of the development and at the same time cater towards the types of units that you see single level, and basically trying to make a maximum use of the property that is there. This also complements the surrounding area and the fact that there is the William Merrifield Park that just would abut the development, and the developers, Mr. Ruscio and Mr. Cuglietta, will be ensuring that there is, as part of the common element, a pathway to that park. This is another great project that I'm happy to present because of the fact that we've seen these. They're growing throughout the community, as I've mentioned already. We have multiple attached dwellings. There are 14 units, so there will be 14 buildings comprised of 3 and 4 units. And these are market rent type of units. So basically looking at coming in at rents that are at the market level. The access, which is very important to note, is that it will be both coming in through Patrick Street and through Wallace Terrace, in a private road that will take you from one end to the other of the development. And of course, the walkway has already been mentioned. I don't know if there are any particular questions, but it seems pretty clear that this is another great development that's being presented for the west end of the city and catering to a need where we see some need for these types of units where there's a growing demand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Spatafora. Is there anybody else, Madam Clerk, that's registered before I take questions or comments? Is anybody else that's registered to speak either for or against the application?
Nobody has registered to speak either for or against.
Okay, I'll start with you, Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess several questions to Mr. Spatafora. Regarding this private roadway, and you said the entrance would be on Patrick Street and Wallace Terrace. Will it be like an entry and an exit, or both of them will be entry exits? Do you know?
Yes. Thank you very much for the question. It will be two-way, so it will be entry and exit at both points.
Now, on Patrick Street, where would it be? Where the lots are, in between? I can't see
yes.
the. Is
yes.
that where? Yeah.
Yes. To Mr. Bruni, to Mr. Bruni's question, yes, there was there's a duplex that was recently built in the area, and it would be basically to the south of that location, and it would run through. And there are some lots that the developer owns that would abut this entrance point to the south, and then obviously they have some another lot or two to the north of that one building that's been recently built there.
Okay. And you mentioned regarding the start date would be this spring, early summer?
Ideally this spring, this summer, yes.
Okay, and the finish date?
Well, this would be a phased, the intention is to do this through a phased construction, and that's one of the benefits of doing it through the way of the vacant land condo or a condo plan. At the end of the day, to a certain extent, so the plan right now is to do 3 phases. And to a certain extent, it will be governed by market demand, and at the same time, trying to do things in an orderly fashion, starting towards the Wallace Terrace entrance point.
Yeah, the only concern I have is the neighbors in the area. If this is like a 3-year project, well, it's 3 years that the project continues, eh? So just with the noise level and the dust and the dirt and et cetera, but I totally understand. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. If I may just add one point of clarification, very important point that Councillor Bruni brings up. At the same time, given that this is for 14 units, meaning 14 buildings of 49 units, the expectation on the part of the developers is to get it done as soon as possible, perhaps a couple of years on the top end, just in case of demand.
So for clarity, Mr. Spatafora, the 14 units as soon as possible, or the 49 units as soon as possible?
Sorry, I wish to clarify. So we're talking about a condo plan, and with the condo plan, we're talking about 14 units. If we envision 14 lots, and then there's 49 apartment units. So it's 49 apartment units, and the intention is to get those completed within a 2-year span.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to make sure it was clear for anybody watching.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Councilor Gardy, you have comments?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I just think that this is a great use of that property. It's sat vacant for a while. I think it'll be a cool place to live for people to have access to the tennis courts there and the rink. And I look forward to the developer working closely with city staff to make a nice development there. So we welcome those in the West End. Thanks.
Councilor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One question for Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, the road, the access road is a private road. How do we handle waste collection and recycling?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Nero, that's correct. The road through the middle of the project is a private road. It's better to think of it as a driveway rather than as a municipal roadway. We will not be doing snow plowing, nor will we be doing waste collection on the project. They, as a condominium corporation, will be responsible for making their own arrangements for that. But municipal crews will not be doing road maintenance. We will not be doing snow removal, and we will not be doing garbage collection.
So it wouldn't be a matter of getting waste bins and recycling bins out to Patrick Street. It would be collected inside on the right of way of that complex by the contractor.
Again, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councilor Nero, that's correct. Our preliminary site plans show consolidated garbage collection spaces within the complex.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councilor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments are similar to those Councilor Gardy has said, but just that we've seen a number of these school rehabilitation projects come forward. The ones that are completed, I'm thinking specifically of St. Teresa's, have turned out very nicely. Bayview Public School has turned out very nicely. I know the developer in this case is very reputable, does great work, and happy to support this and see another one of these projects come to fruition in our community.
Anything else, Council? So my appreciation to the developer, Mr. Spatafora. This is a great project. I'm happy to support it, and I'm sure they'll do a good job with it. So we will call the vote. All in favor? Project application's approved, Mr. Spatafora. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much, and thank you to council.
Once you have Councillor Hollingsworth is also a yes. Once you have Councillor Hollingsworth recorded and the vote closed, we can move to 7.7.2.
Application A121Z OP 561 and 571 Second Line West. A motion by Councillors Christian and Scott. Resolved that the report of the planner dated January 25, 2021 concerning official plan and zoning application A121ZOP be received, and that council approve official plan amendment number 230 to permit personal storage uses on the subject property. And further be it resolved that council rezone 561 and 571 Second Line West from low density residential zone R3 to low density residential zone R3S with a special exception to permit, in addition to those uses permitted in an R3 zone, the following special provisions. 1, permit personal storage on the northern 95 meters of 571 Second Line West and the entirety of 561 Second Line West. Number 2, permit a 1.8 meter high fence in the front yard of 571 Second Line West. Number 3, reduce the rear yard setback from the southerly lot line from 10 meters to 7.5 meters for the townhouse only, and the subject property be deemed subject to site plan control as per section 41 of the Planning Act, and that the legal department be requested to prepare the necessary bylaws to effect the same. And the applicants are also on the call.
Okay, we will start with Mr. McConnell before we go to the applicants. Mr. McConnell, could you give the folks watching at home a summary of this application, please?
Yes, this property, this is an application for property on the south side of Second Line West. immediately east of the Central Creek Flood Control Channel. The property has access both to Second Line and to Connaught Avenue. The applicants are proposing to develop it for 2 separate uses. The northern part with access onto Second Line will be for personal storage units, and the southern part with access onto Connaught Avenue will be for 11 townhouse units. And yes, I see the applicants are on the line with us. It is recommended for approval by staff, and be happy to take any questions on this.
Okay. So I see I have a Mr. Kelly on the line, or are you here to represent the applicant, sir? If you could just unmute yourself there.
There we go.
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah, very good.
Okay.
Yeah.
To clarify, I'm David Topan. I'm logged
sorry.
in as Ben Chikelli, which is my partner.
Yeah. You're so I apologize, Mr. Tope. We've never met, but I see your screen. It says Ben Kelly on my screen here. So
Sure.
you Mr. Topan are welcome to speak. Are you speaking on behalf of the application?
Yes, and Mr. McConnell pretty much summed up the development.
Okay. So council, do we have any questions for Mr. McConnell or the applicant, Mr. Topan? Councilor Shoemaker, go ahead.
I don't have questions, Mr. Mayor. I have comments, but
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I know Mr. Kelly a little bit. I don't know Mr. Topan so well, but I'm happy to see a couple of young developers in town bringing forward projects. This is a great use of a piece of land that you know at first blush is almost seems unusable. So it's glad to see it is going forward with a bit of mixed use residential and some commercial space there as well. And I think from Mr. McConnell's report, it's clear that they have and will satisfy all the concerns that have been raised. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any other councilors that want to make any comments on this application? Madam Clerk, is there anybody else registered to speak either for or against the application?
There is no one registered to speak either in favor or against.
Okay, very well. I'm very happy to support the application, and I certainly wish you well with the development. If we can have a vote on it then, please, all in favor? Mr. Topan, your application is approved. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And Councillor Hollingsworth also supports it.
Under agenda item 7.7.3, 134, 136, and 138 John Street, a motion by councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy, resolved that the report of the planner dated January 25, 2021 concerning rezoning application A221Z be received, and that council rezone 134, 136, and 138 John Street from low-density residential zone R3 to low-density residential zone R3S with a special exception to permit, in addition to the uses permitted in an R3 zone, office space, an assembly facility, and an arts, culture, and heritage use establishment on the subject property, subject to the following special provisions. Number one, that the required setbacks from John Street be reduced to a half a meter for both the former Assembly Hall and church buildings, and that the required setback from Albert Street West be reduced to 1.5 meters for the former church building, and that the legal department be requested to prepare the necessary bylaws to effect the same. Jason Nacarado is on the call.
Okay. So before we get to Mr. Nacarado, we'll go to Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, could you please give the viewers at home, Mr. Nacarado, can I get you to mute?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. And Mr. McConnell, if I could get you to just explain to the viewers at home what this application is about, and then we'll go to Mr. Nacarado.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This application is on the former Anglican Church, the John Street Anglican Church on the corner of John Street and Albert Street West. The property was recently purchased by the Métis Nation of Ontario, and as the clerk explained, they are looking for a rezoning approval to allow some office space for their own operations, as well as an assembly hall and a cultural center. It is recommended for approval by staff, and Mr. Nacarado is the agent for the applicant, and he is also on the phone tonight.
Okay, Mr. Nacarado, if you can unmute there.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So did you want to make any representations, Mr. Nacarado, on behalf of your client?
Well,
I thank you, first of all, for hearing us here tonight. We have been to council in the past, and we thank council at that point in time. We did receive a contribution from the Economic Development Fund. We did present at that time. This is the same project that council had supported about a year and a half ago. It's the same idea behind it, to preserve and promote the Métis culture. We firmly believe that there's no place in Ontario that has as much rich culture and heritage as far as the Métis Nation is concerned. This project really brings light to that fact, and really brings light to all the history that Sault Ste. Marie has around the Métis Nation and the Métis culture. And this center will be in the downtown. We feel it's in line with a lot of the initiatives that City Council has been pushing forward through the Economic Development Center and Future Sault Ste. Marie, and a lot of the downtown initiatives. We think we're in line with all of that. And like I said, we appreciate Council's support for this project in the past, and we're just here to answer any questions that you may have on this particular application to allow us to proceed.
Great. I appreciate that very much, Mr. Nacarado. Council, do you have any questions or comments on the application? Start with Councilor Vezo-Allen, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Nacarado. I just have two questions. I would just like to know, the assembly facility, is that going to be a maker space, or what is going to be part of that assembly facility component?
Yeah, so the assembly facility will be there to have gatherings, ceremonies, as well as it'll be used to have some of the dance classes and the art classes that are part of this programming. So some of the traditional Métis dance will be taught and exhibited in that space, as well as some of the traditional Métis artwork, including some of the painting and beadwork. Above and beyond that, there are some traditional ceremonies that will be taking place, and any time that the community wants to use it as a gathering space, it will be made available.
So then with the arts and culture space, is that going to be similar to a formalized gallery space where the public can come in and view art? Or is that sort of part and parcel of that assembly space?
So the former church will be used as a space to have historical artwork as well as artifacts on display. And that'll be a space for viewing and for citizens of the Sioux, as well as tourists, to come in and see some of the artifacts that the historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council has gathered over the years. And some of them are of very significant importance to the Métis Nation of Ontario. In addition to that, we have the hall building, and that'll be used as a gathering space where they'll have ceremonies, festivals, gatherings, art classes, things of that sort will be done in the hall area. So there's three buildings on the site. The church will be more for the artifacts and a place of displaying some of the history, and more of the activities will be done in the hall building.
Okay, and they'll be doing all of their administrative operations out of the new space as well?
Yeah, that would be the third building. So that's the former rectory, which will undergo a significant renovation. And that portion of the project is what's bringing us here to get our permitting to proceed with the construction.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Councilor Vezo-Allen. Any other? So we have Councilor Hilsinger, then Councilor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This question is for Mr. McConnell. I'm wanting to make sure that I understand properly this reduction in parking. And I'm hearing the words gathering space and places for people to go. Am I reading this correctly, that there would only be 10 parking spaces on the development?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Hilsinger. That's correct. There are 10 spaces there now. The city, as part of our zoning bylaw, has a special provision on parking in the downtown, and it's to basically encourage the reuse of buildings in the downtown. So any building in the downtown can be used for any legal use, provided that without providing additional parking, provided that the building is not expanded. If the building is expanded, then you would have to provide additional parking. Since they're using the existing buildings with no plans to expand, at least at this time, then the 10 parking spaces would be sufficient. There are considerable other number of on-street parking spaces though in the area, and they're aware of those limitations and those restrictions. But that's correct. This is a legal use without council approval as is with regards to parking.
Okay, so I'm just is there a requirement to have any kind of an additional parking plan available, or people would use the street? Or I see the intention, which is beautiful, is that there's numbers and people would gather, and I'm just trying to put the two together.
I think Mr.
May I
Nacarado
comment
wants
on?
to comment.
Yeah, if I could. So through you, Mr. Mayor, we have come up with a plan in that regard, and we have discussed with the Algoma District School Board, and we have a letter from them permitting us to use the Etienne Brule parking lot in the event that we have any type of function that requires additional parking. They're happy to allow us to use that parking lot as overflow.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councilor Nero, I apologize.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, just to follow up on the parking that you just answered, the motion asks for special provision. Should not the parking be in the motion as well?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Nero, it doesn't need to be, I mean, we could add it, but it doesn't need to be because it is in the city's general zoning bylaw. This property is part of the downtown, and as such, benefits from the reduced parking requirement, provided the building is not expanded.
Okay, so it's covered by the general downtown policy. Good
That's
enough.
correct.
Thank you, Mr. McConnell. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anything else, Council? Councilor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that it's great to see buildings being reused in the downtown. I agree that this is a great addition to some of the projects that council has been trying to push forward, and I wish the Métis Nation all the best of luck with their development. Thanks.
Very much so. Happy to support the Historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council, and we can call a vote on this now, I think. All in favor? Mr. Nacarado, you can advise your client that the application was passed and the application is approved.
Thank you very much, Council. We appreciate your support.
Okay, take care. Thank you very much. Councilor Hollingsworth is also in favor. So that brings us, I think, Madam Clerk, when you're done recording that vote, back to the consent agenda. Am I correct in that respect?
That is correct.
Okay, so I have Councilor Vezo-Allen to start the consent agenda. Councilor Vezo-Allen, what's your first matter?
My first matter, Mr. Mayor, is 6.3.
So general insurance services, go ahead.
Correct. Through you, Mr. Mayor, probably to Mr. Gowans. Of the RFPs, they were sent out, advertised, but also to firms on the bidders list. I noticed that there were only 3 that were received. How does one determine the bidders list, or how does one get on the bidder list? I'm just a little concerned that we only had one local agency that responded.
Mr.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen, it's
okay.
Shelley Shell. Tim Gowans is not present for tonight's meeting, so I will provide you as much information as I have. Our bids are posted on our website as well as to the MERC system so that they're available to the public, and they typically get picked up by a lot of other agencies as well that put them on their lists as well. So we do have a far reach, even though there was only a couple that were on our actual vendors list. Our vendors list are typically vendors that we have dealt with before that have provided a quality service and are in good standing with the city.
Okay, thank you very much. And regarding the 24% increase, which we did go through with budget, can you give perhaps just a high level reasoning behind with our liability insurance? It's a 24% increase.
To Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezo-Allen, that would probably be best addressed by legal.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. Adam Shire is on the meeting call and can answer the technical questions.
Great. Thanks, Adam.
Hi. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. The industry has seen sharp increases over the last 2 years. 24% is the adjusted increase for the calendar year and is lower than a lot of communities are experiencing. We expected an increase and frankly had expected a higher increase.
Okay. So it's not because of level of incidents or claims or things like that. It's just an industry-wide increase.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen, correct. The increase is across all municipalities nationally. There's only 3 or 4 providers of municipal insurance in Canada. So every municipality in Canada is insured through one of 4, generally speaking, and the liability insurance is underwritten in some cases and oftentimes through different Lloyd's of London syndicates. There's been profitability issues with municipal programs in different parts of the province and in different parts of the country. So there's some of the liability or casualty companies have withdrawn from the marketplace. So there's kind of the compounding impact or the compounding effect of claims frequencies and lack of markets.
Okay. Okay. Thanks very much, Adam. I don't have anything further on 6.3.
Okay, Paul, Councillor Christian does. Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to pick up on Councillor Vezo-Allen's line of questioning, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Scheer. So if I understand you correctly, this increase is simply market conditions and has nothing to do or very little to do with the comment mentioned in the document that says that there's enhanced liability coverage. Are you suggesting that of the people that bid on this, they had the best liability coverage for the 24% increase we're going to see? Does that make sense?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian. Yes, Cowan provides the broadest form of liability coverage for municipal clients. So they have the best program available.
Right. Does this then, who had our coverage during the last period? Was it Cowan?
It was not.
Okay.
So prior policy term was underwritten through Aon Insurance.
Okay. And is the coverage now that we have through Cowan any different than the liability coverage we had with the former vendor?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Christian, the coverage that Cowan is proposing is different from what we had last year, but also different from what would have been proposed this year through Aon.
Okay. All right.
So every year they'll propose different terms as depending on what their suppliers are offering them.
Okay. So it's like comparing apples to oranges, but in this case, for the 24% increase, this is the best bang for our buck.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay. I had one other question. It also says that that Cowan offers municipal risk management tools. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What specifically or generally does that mean?
Okay, so through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Christian, Cowan has what is viewed as best in class risk management tools. So they will perform a whole host of activities for the municipality included in the cost of or in the premium they've quoted, including on-site inspections of, I believe, about 75 of our different buildings and locations. So they'll do risk assessments, they'll do building valuations, they'll be comprehensive reports provided to us. There's approximately 25 per year over the next 3 years. Excuse me, they do road risk assessment training and courses that are available to Public Works, Transit, Police Services, Fire Department, things like that. Fleet management evaluation, so they'll come in and look at the different types of fleet vehicles we have and suggestions or opportunities to maybe reduce some of the exposures that we may see around those things. Contract reviews, and they've got something, they call it the risk management center of excellence, and that is really something that Cowan is the only one that has that, and it's a really phenomenal online tool that's available to us, again, at no cost and whenever we want to avail ourselves of it, but a whole host of documentation and videos and training tools and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you mentioned these are at no extra cost, or do some of them have a fee associated with them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, there are other things they offer that would have a cost, but everything I just spoke of is included at no additional cost.
Okay, so just for my own benefit, then there's a lot of risk mitigation built into this insurance coverage as well.
There is, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, do we have any other councillors that have questions or comments on 6.3? Seeing none, Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you. My next one is 6.4. And I think probably either Mr. Vare or Mr. Anderson. It's just concerning the downtown wayfinding portion. There's $160,000, which is from the NOHFC funding. And if you could just give a high level review of what that will entail and if that will suffice with what's needed in the downtown in terms of the signage.
So we have Mr. Anderson here. Mr. Anderson, I assume you're taking this question. There you go.
Through, sorry about that, it's just stuck on mute. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. So there's two parts to this report. One is the wayfinding for the downtown. And that funding is actually being supplied through NOHFC through the planning department. I'm going to be administering that contract on their behalf and can speak to the fact that the original wayfinding design that we had done that was for the entire community included a large portion of the downtown. So that portion would be from East Street over to the Canal District, including the mill site and Bay and Queen and areas in between. There's a substantial amount of signage in that area to highlight some of the key attractions in the community, including the art gallery, the new train station on the mill property, as well as the bush plane and our other cultural attractions. Just on that, just wanted to circle back on your question. Is your concern broadly the number of signs in that location or the overall cost for those signs?
I'm just wondering, because I do know that the signage, it has been a difficulty in terms of clarity for visitors and even citizens to figure out where they're going and that sort of thing. And wondering if, as people are coming into the community, if there's signage to direct them, like you'll see signage on Albert and Wellington, is that going to be included or is it just going to be like really in that core area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. The intent of the wayfinding strategy was really for those coming into the community, not necessarily local residents. So it's to highlight some of our more scenic and tourism-friendly routes. So with that in mind, the focus is, as you were coming potentially from the south, so crossing the International Bridge, you'd be directed onto Bay Street, and through the community that way and back onto Queen if you're remaining in the downtown core. So there wasn't emphasis on directing traffic through Wellington and Albert, largely because we wanted to direct individuals towards our cultural attractions and tourism destinations, including the waterfront.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have on 6.4. Thanks, Travis.
Anybody else on 6.4? Can you get another one, Councillor Vezovallen?
6.10, the pathway.
610, go ahead.
And it's not a question, it's just a comment that I wanted to make for my participation on the accessibility committee. I did receive an email from a constituent with some concerns, and I just want to say that that is one thing that people that are using assistive mobility devices is the difficulty when they're on any type of rough terrain, and how even stones and pebbles really can affect both comfort and the ability for them to use their devices depending on what it is. And I support this, and I think it's a wonderful way that we are creating better accessibility for people that need mobility devices. And I am just really going to support it and know firsthand from the people that I'm involved with on that committee, the difficulties that they do have, especially when they want to engage in outdoor activities. So I just want to say thanks for this to be coming forward, and I support it 100%.
Okay, Councillor Shoemaker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. This is a great project. I'd raise my hand to indicate I had questions on other issues, but I would echo Councillor Vezovallen's comments on this proposal.
Okay, I'll come back to you then next on the consent list. Councillor Christian, on this matter?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I also want to lend my support to this. That area is so beautiful, and it would be a shame if we did not have these opportunities for everybody in our community. Those areas are only as good as our ability to provide access to everybody. This is long overdue. I've been a huge fan of that area, and I'd like everybody to enjoy the same opportunities I do to enjoy it. So I'm really supporting this 100%.
Okay, Councillor Christian, thank you. Anybody else on 6.10 before we move on? Councillor Shoemaker, you have matters you want to discuss in the consent list?
6.5, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, it's yours.
Through you to Mr. White. Mr. White, the proposal is to use funds that had been allocated for the Chief Technology Officer to pay for this contract in the coming year. Is this, should I understand this to mean that the proposal is not to go forward with a Chief Technology Officer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. No, the intention is still to fill that position. We hadn't been able to fill it last year for a variety of circumstances. Because the money had been budgeted for last year, and because the Black Line report had noted how underinvested we are in IT, staff has recommended that the unspent portion of that budget from last year is carried over and now reallocated to investment in IT.
Okay, that makes sense. That answers a couple other questions I had. If the idea was not to go forward with the Chief Technology Officer, can you advise, is the plan in 2021 to hire a Chief Technology Officer or to put out for a Chief Technology Officer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, yes, we will be viewing that. We found the process to be challenging last year for a variety of reasons. So we will be reassessing. If there is a different path we feel we need to take, we will of course be reporting back to council on it.
Yes, okay, good, thank you.
Okay, anybody else on 6.5? Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Shoemaker, anything else?
I don't believe so. I'm just flipping to make sure, Mr. Mayor. No, I believe that's all. Thank you.
Any other matters? Councilors have any matters on consent? Councillor Dufour.
6.2.
Go ahead.
And it's just a comment. I'd like to thank CAO White and all the staff at the Finance and Legal Department for continuing to help expedite the transfer of tax sale properties to the DSAB. I know that these are very valuable properties to have. It allows us to either expand affordable housing through under our own umbrella or under the umbrella of Habitat. And regardless of who's doing the work, we need land to build on, and we really appreciate your efforts on this file. So thank you, Mr. White. Thank you, Mr. Provenzano, and I hope this will again have the unanimous support of council.
Thank you. Any other comments on 6.2 or questions on 6.2? Councillor Christian, do you have a matter on, Councillor Dufour, are we done your matters on consent?
I had one more, 6.15. Again, just my thanks to the legal department for bringing this forward. I think it makes a lot of sense to have some staff flexibility built into our liability requirements. It keeps us out of situations that otherwise we'd be requiring excessive amounts of insurance for little reason. So thank you guys very much for getting this back so fast.
Anybody else in 6.15? Seeing none. Councillor Christian, you have matters on consent?
Yes, sir. Just 6.11 Downtown Plaza, just a comment.
Yeah.
Just want to thank FedNor for their contribution and for the vision that we share in this project. This is great news. I'm a proponent of this. I think it's important for the downtown. I recognize in some quarters in the community that there's some question about the functionality and vision for this project, but I do think it's very, very important. I think it's multifaceted, and I think it'll serve the downtown community very, very well and serve our purposes for trying to develop it as well. So I'm happy to see that funding came in.
Very good. I see your hand up on Councillor Scott. You want to comment on 6.11?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Actually, just a quick question. Are we going to be getting a more formalized update on the progress of the plaza in the near future?
Yeah, I will go to the CEO on that, and if Mr. Vera's in the line, he can go to him.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott, you will be getting an update on the Plaza project. Mr. Vera and his staff have been working hard with the designers to zero in on the final design and cost estimates of the plaza. So I would expect an update to you certainly within a month's time.
Great, thank you. Because then I'll just reserve, because I had some more questions about that, but if we don't have a design finalized or anything like that, those can all wait. Thank you for that.
Anybody else in 6.11? Councillor Christian, do you have any other matters on the consent agenda? No. Council, do we have any other matters? Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question on 6.8, the mausoleum.
Go ahead.
Question to Mr. Lamming. I guess the report states, Mr. Lamming, that our current demand indicates practical need for a new mausoleum. I believe there's an outstanding resolution from Councillor Shoemaker and myself requesting that staff look into a covered, closed-in mausoleum. Would you expect that we would be looking at that when we look at the next mausoleum coming up?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Nero, you're correct. We do have that to come back. I believe it's in March on the indoor mausoleum to follow up on that. Just to let you know, we've had one inquiry for the year on that. So I think unless something changes, we'd be focusing our efforts on probably expanding the footprint of another outdoor mausoleum build at this time, pending what the reserve sits at after the year-end audit from the accountants.
Okay, based on the report, and you know that we have room for another 8 to 9 mausoleums. Could be further up the road that if more requests come in, requiring or requesting a closed-in mausoleum.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Neal, yeah, we'd be happy to explore that. And yes, we do have room for 8 or 9 more mausoleums to build, and the definite demand here. This is the highest we've had since 1983. So the payback was 2 days on this this sale. So staff was quite pleased with that.
It's good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Laming. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anybody else in 6.8? Councillor Gardy.
Yeah, just to follow up on something that that Mr. Laming had mentioned through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Laming, and forgive me, maybe I should know this, but in terms of gauging interest in something like an indoor mausoleum, how is that kind of how do we find that out? How do we engage anybody in that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. Yes, we did have a report to council a year ago on this matter, and we did put out to the public to reach out to our city clerk office and also our cemetery office. We've had I do follow up quite frequently with both the city clerk and also the manager of the cemetery, and we've had the one inquiry to date. So there hasn't been a great demand to date for indoor mausoleums, but as the report here indicates, there's definite demand to continue looking and exploring outdoor mausoleums.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else in 6? Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just I have some familiarity with the sales process on this most recent round of mausoleums, and I wanted to thank our cemetery staff. I understand that there were folks lined up on the day that they went for sale at before 6 a.m. So you know, a long day for our cemetery staff, and a lot of anxious or not anxious, but people that were yearning to get one of these plots, as the demand is very high. So thanks to them, and thanks to all the staff that helped facilitate the construction of this new phase of the mausoleums. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else in 6.8? See no one. Thank you, Mr. Laming. Do we have any other matters from you, Mr. Nero, Councillor Nero? Is that the extent of the consent matters, Council? Appears to be, Madam Clerk.
I have a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Gardy. Resolved that all items listed under date January 25, 2021, agenda item 6, consent agenda, be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Motion is carried, including Councillor Hollingsworth. Okay, so that brings us to bylaws then, I think, Madam Clerk. Go ahead.
That's correct. I have a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott. Resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date January 25, 2021, save and accept bylaws 2021-20, 2021-21, and 2021-22 be approved.
All in favor? Motion is carried, including Councillor Hollingsworth.
I will just go to the bylaws that were accepted from consent because of Councillor Shoemaker's conflict.
Very good.
Motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott. Resolved that bylaw 2021-20, being a bylaw to adopt amendment number 229 to the official plan amendment for the city of Sault Ste. Marie, be passed in open council this 25th day of January 2021. I've opened that for voting.
All in favor? Carried, including Councillor Hollingsworth. I don't know about you, Council, but Madam Clerk, I'm not getting the votes on my e-scribe, so.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Yeah, so you just gotta enter. Everybody was in favor.
All this evening, or just that previous one?
Just the previous. Just the two previous ones. The two on bylaws I haven't received.
I thought 2021-20 didn't come up. We'll see what happens for 2021-21. So motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott. Resolved that bylaw 2021-21, being a bylaw to amend Sault Ste. Marie zoning bylaws 2005-150 and 2005-151 concerning lands located at 719 Airport Road, be passed in open council this 25th day of January 2021.
All in favor? It came up.
Did it come up?
Yeah, and
Oh,
Councillor
very slowly,
Hollingsworth is
though.
in favor. Okay.
Came up and it's frozen.
Yeah, both of them came up at the same time, so I think you're certainly.
That's my trouble,
problem.
right?
But I think you can record everybody in favor, including Councillor Hollingsworth, and close the votes.
Okay. Motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott, resolved that bylaw 2021-22, being a bylaw to designate the lands located at 719 Airport Road an area of site plan control, be passed in open council this 25th day of January 2021. If you can take that manually, I'm frozen out now.
Okay, we will. Everybody in favor? Everybody, including Councillor Hollingsworth. So everybody's in favor, Madam Clerk.
And that will take us to the closed motion. A motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott, resolved that this council move into closed session to discuss 2 items concerning the acquisition or disposition of land, 3 items subject to solicitor-client privilege, and an item subject to third-party confidentiality. Further, be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor? All in favor, including Councillor Hollingsworth.
And a motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Scott that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried. Council will see you on the other Zoom connection in a couple minutes.